Now we're going to move on to the Q&A session. First to ask is Guri from the Norwegian Broadcasting System. While she's asking, other people can register for the speaking list by holding a hand in the air, and I will notice you. Guri, please.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Guri Nordström, and I'm from Norwegian Broadcasting. And this is a question.
I will repeat the question.
This is a question for Mr. Khodorkovsky. What do you think about the current relationship between Russia and the West?
So the question is to Mr. Khodorkovsky, what do you think about the relationship between Russia and the West for the moment?
Они, мягко скажем, не лучшие за последние 30 лет.
These relations aren't in their best shape over the last 30 years, to put it mildly.
Единственное, о чем я хотел бы напомнить, это то, что взаимоотношения с режимом, который сегодня установлен в России, и взаимоотношения с российским народом не должны объединяться в ваших головах в единое целое.
One thing to remind you, though, is that the relations with the regime and the relations with the Russian people should never be mixed or confused.
Okay, you have a follow-up or?
Yeah. Another question. What do you think about Russia's role in Ukraine?
And the question is about Russia's role in Ukraine.
Мне бы очень хотелось, чтобы эта роль там была другой.
I really wish for that role to be something else.
На сегодняшний день я очень надеюсь, что перемирие, которое установлено в Украине, продолжится, и Украина получит возможность спокойно строить свою жизнь и свою экономику.
I hope that today's armistice and peace-building process in the Ukraine will continue, and the Ukraine will be given a chance to peacefully rebuild its economy.
I want to bring in Mr. Jianli and Nemat as well, and I will ask the same question. What do you think about the West relationship to China and the West relationship to Iran accordingly?
Yeah, it is a very complicated question. I can simply not answer it in 1 minute. I just want to remind everyone here that two major dictators, China and Russia, both rooted in the dictatorship of communism, now are bent on encroaching on freedom on two front lines. One is in Ukraine, the other is in Hong Kong. So all in unfolding. So we have to think the question, what should we do here to roll back their encroachment?
Right. Yeah. Nemat, the West relationship to Iran, it's an ongoing discussion all the time, isn't it?
It is. Well, we have to remember that the West, especially the United States of America and Great Britain, they have had a series of devastating foreign policies in the Middle East in general. And that needs to be considered. Right now, Iran has a new president. He's now been in power more than a year, Mr. Rouhani. And suddenly the West, I know many politicians in the West thought that, okay, it's all over, it's all good. Now Iran is a democracy, every problem is fixed, which is not the case at all. The number of executions in Iran have increased this year. The number of arrests of religious minorities and political dissidents, it has increased. I don't believe in bombing Iran. I don't believe bombs solve any problems. Do we need to speak Iran? Yes, we do need to speak with Iran. But in addition to speaking about Iran's nuclear abilities, I think every negotiation should start and end with the issue of human rights and the release of political prisoners in Iran. I think that needs to be included in those negotiations.
Excellent. I will just repeat the speakers list so I'm sure that I don't ignore anyone. First is Åse behind Guri there, and then I noticed Bård, also Jan Åge Torp. I don't know everybody here, so it has to be a guy on the first bench behind there, you, and you who signed there. And I'm going to end the speakers list during the next question, so I make sure that we are finished here on time. Åse?
After what's been going on outside Stockholm these last few days with the Navy searching for what might be a Russian submarine, 7 out of 10 Swedes feel there's a need to strengthen the Swedish defense. In your opinion, do we have a reason to care Putin's Russia?
So the question is about the submarine, which are the hunt for the submarine in Swedish waters.
Ну, по опросам общественного мнения 7 из 10 шведов считают, что они должны укреплять оборонный потенциал страны. Считаете ли вы, что это действительно оправданно и необходимо?
Я твердо убежден, что любая страна, народ, который хочет оставаться независимой, должна иметь свою армию.
I'm deeply convinced that any country, the people of which wants to continue being independent, should have an army.
Последние десятилетия в Европе выдались спокойными, и многие европейцы об этом непреложном факте забыли.
The last few decades in Europe turned out to be quite calm, and many Europeans seem to have forgotten about what may be happening.
Я думаю, что эпоха постмодернизма, когда все можно будет решать на словах, еще не наступила.
I don't believe that the era of postmodernism, where all disputes could be resolved with words, has not yet come about.
Thank you, and then we move on to Bård.
Yes, as I understand, Mr. Khodorkovsky, you were sent to a prison camp in the outpost of Siberia next to the Chinese border. And of course, in history, we know about the Gulag systems. And we know that these were nominally taken out of its state after Stalin's death. So they say that after Stalin there were no more Gulag, but Anne Applebaum, the historian from Poland, has said that Gulag actually existed until 1989 under a bit different from, of course, the Stalin oppression. But is it possible to say that there is a kind of a Gulag system, prison camp system in today's Russia? And what are the conditions in these prison camps? And I would like to pass the question further to the others on the panel. Are there any prison camp systems that are comparable to the old Soviet Gulag systems, and how are the conditions for prisoners in these camps?
So the question is about the prison conditions in Russia, China, and Iran, and the connection to Gulag. I'm sure there are room for some improvements on the prison conditions, but Mr. Khodorkovsky first.
Я не знаю, насколько это в этом обществе прозвучит вежливо.
I don't know the extent to which this might sound polite in this audience, what I'm going to say.
Но когда я был в тюрьме, мы видели по телевизору, в каких условиях содержится у вас господин Брейвик.
But when I was in prison, I watched the television and I saw the conditions under which Mr. Breivik was kept in prison in Norway.
Я уверяю вас, что ему завидуют не только 10 из 10 российских арестантов, но и 8 из 10 свободных россиян.
I assure you that not only 10 out of 10 of the Russian prisoners are jealous of him, but 8 out of 10 free citizens are too.
Тем не менее, ситуация после ГУЛАГа изменилась.
But nevertheless, the situation did change after the gulags.
При всем моем понятном отношении к господину Путину, это надо признавать.
Given due respect to all of my attitudes of a particular kind to Mr. Putin, I have to admit this.
Хотя, наверное, вам покажется странным то, что я скажу.
Even though, again, what I'm going to say might seem odd to you.
Очень важно, что сейчас в тюрьме кормят, и что сейчас в тюрьме не мучают холодом.
What's important is that they feed the inmates in the prisons nowadays, and they don't torture them with cold.
И бьют редко.
And they don't beat them too often.
Поверьте мне, это большое продвижение.
Believe me, this is a great achievement.
And then we move on to Mr. Jianli, the conditions in China, prison system.
Yep, China copied totalitarian planned economy system from Soviet Union. It also copied the Gulag system. So that is called re-education labor camp in China. And last year, after the UN's periodical universal review on China, China announced to get rid of that system. But the reality is there are still a lot of re-education labor camps in China. The conditions are very bad. Falun Gong practitioners have documented the situations and human rights violation cases in these camps very well. And I just want to say China has undergone many changes, but some, of course, change for the better, but some for worse. In terms of controlling the whole society, Chinese government has invented many other ways than just gulag. For example, black jails. There are so many black jails all over China. So police and even parapolice can arbitrarily arrest anybody they don't like and torture them. And all these are off record. And just in recent, 2 years ago, a dozen of my friends were detained in Beijing and received severe torture. And they are very respected human rights lawyers. Yeah.
Marina Nemat, you mentioned the prison conditions in Iran, and it sounded quite frankly terrible. But if you could elaborate, how are they? How are they built up?
Oh, I can elaborate, all right. Yeah, we were always hungry. The amount of food that they gave us was hardly enough to keep you alive. So we were basically always hungry. And then the first time that I was there, when they gave me a cup of tea, they gave us a cup of tea in the evening, and we really looked forward to that because it was the only hot drink. And Tehran is cold in winter. And then I smelled the tea, and it smelled disgusting. I mean, I looked at my cellmates, and I said, what is this? And they said, well, don't worry about it. It's good. Drink it. They've put camphor in the tea. Camphor is an embalming substance. It is poisonous. What it does, it devastates, it completely throws off balance a woman's reproductive system. We stopped getting our periods. And I couldn't understand why until later on, when I realized that sometimes girls were called for interrogation at midnight and they were returned to the cell block at 5 a.m. with no visible torture signs. And then later it happened to me. Basically, they took me in, my interrogator looked at me in the eye and said, listen, you had a death sentence, it was reduced to life in prison, you're going to be here forever, nobody cares, so you are going to become my wife, convert to Islam, or I will arrest your parents. So I thought about it. If he arrested my parents, I wouldn't have a home to go back to. I said, fine. So basically, I lost my freedom, my family, my religion, my name, and my dignity. I was being raped over and over again under the name of marriage because the Sharia judge said a few words and I was suddenly my interrogator's wife. I was 17. I was being raped over and over again in solitary confinement in Evin prison. And the conditions in Iranian prisons, they have not improved. In Iran, a woman who's raped is considered subhuman. So women to whom this happens, they don't usually talk about it because it means that then your family's honor has been lost. To be honest with you, I don't care about my family's honor. What I care about, I want these practices to stop because we suffered. I had a friend who was about to be executed, and she said to me, Marina, I hope they just kill me. I just don't want to be raped. Please, please, can we just ask them just to kill me? Because I just can't take it anymore. So, you know, you push young girls to the point that they want to die. I want that to stop.
Thank you. Jan Norgetorp.
First of all, God bless you, brave freedom fighters. I have a question to Mr. Khodorkovsky. You are a Jew, and we have a rising tide of anti-Semitism in Norway and also in Western Europe. What would you say is the situation for the Jewish population in Russia today, and even in Russian prisons?
So the question is about rising anti-Semitism and the Jewish population in Russia.
Мне сложно будет говорить за всех, потому что Россия большая, и, наверное, в разных местах это по-разному.
I would find it difficult to speak for all because Russia is a big country and the attitude varies throughout this country.
Мне не приходилось за всю мою жизнь сталкиваться с проблемой антисемитизма.
Throughout my entire life, I have never encountered the problem of anti-Semitism.
Может быть, это свойство личности.
Maybe it's a trait of my character.
Конечно, я читаю антисемитские высказывания в интернете.
I do come across anti-Semitic statements on the internet.
Но там можно прочитать много чего.
But there are lots of other things that you can possibly find on the internet too.
Я не считаю, что эта проблема решена полностью.
I do not consider that this issue has been resolved once and for all.
И, конечно, по мере роста шовинистических настроений и проблема антисемитизма будет нарастать.
And as chauvinism gains ground in my country, I anticipate that the problem of anti-Semitism may take larger dimensions too.
Но я могу в этом отношении говорить только о личных впечатлениях.
But once again, I can only speak from my personal experience by way of answering this question.
First row in the back, you. Please stand up and speak up. Present.
Maybe a difficult question, but what should we do in the West, or have some advice maybe how we can help in improving the situation now between Russia and Ukraine? That's
Right.
a difficult question, I guess, but what is it that advice is from?
Well, so the question is, what can we in the West do to help the situation between Ukraine and Russia?
Над этой проблемой думает большое количество умных людей.
A lot of smart people are raking their brains, trying to find a solution to this problem.
И я не думаю, что я что-нибудь особое добавлю к их
And
размышлениям.
I don't believe I'm in a position to add much to what they're pondering.
То, что я повторяю постоянно,
Something that I tend to repeat over and over again, though,
что самое плохое, что может сделать Запад, это противопоставить Россию и Запад, российский народ и остальных европейцев.
the worst thing that the West can possibly do is to juxtapose the people of Russia and the people of the rest of the world.
Вторая плохая вещь, ошибка, которую можно допустить,
Another bad idea
это относиться к России не так, как диктуют европейские ценности, а так, как выгодно в текущий момент.
Another bad idea would be to treat Russia not along the lines of traditional European values, but along the lines of convenience, what seems to make sense at this possible moment in time.
А это подводит нас к тому, что надо смотреть на конкретных людей и относиться к ним так, как они заслуживают.
The logical conclusion is to single out specific people and to treat these people the way they deserve it.
Я вас уверяю, на эту тему здесь, в Западной Европе, сделано далеко не все.
I assure you that far from all has been so far been done to this extent in Western Europe.
Очень многие люди непосредственно организующие происходящее, остаются вне внимания общественности.
Far too many people who are masterminding what's currently going on are left without due attention on the part of the West.
Некоторая часть европейских политиков выступает не вполне бескорыстно, также отстаивая аморальные ценности.
There are certain European politicians excuse me, who, in presenting their political position, are not always 100% morally clean and integral.
Это та проблема, которую можно решить здесь, но с остальным нам придется справляться
This
самим.
part of the problem, I'm sure, can be tackled on this side. What about the rest? I guess we need to take care about it ourselves.
We often talk about free trade. Very few people actually oppose free trade. But when one of the partners in the trade, so-called free trade, is not free, so the process must be distorted somewhere, somehow. So we have to be alert to it. And I support fully engagement with China, but that engagement should not be exclusive with the Chinese government itself. Should be comprehensive to include engagement with the democratic movement. Otherwise, you don't understand China. I often say there are two Chinas in China. So people often see one China, which Chinese government has put a lot of effort to project to, and the other China is often overlooked. The China consists of 1 billion people, and under exploitation of the elite class, and their leaders, most of them, very recognized leaders are in prison. So that's another China. So my suggestion is we have to look China as two Chinas and engage with both. I support trade and I support engagement. But don't forget, sooner or later, China will, people will transform themselves into a viable democracy movement demanding for the overall change. When the moment comes, I don't hope the whole world, is surprised and not ready to help. Thank you.
Marina Nemat, let me rephrase the question a bit and ask you, how can the West and we engage with Iranian people without strengthening the regime? Should we invest? Should we have foreign direct investments in Iran? How should we go about?
No, I wouldn't go as far as to say that the West should engage in any sort of economical transactions with Iran. Let me explain this. Let's say, I'm a writer and I do write fiction and non-fiction. Just imagine for a moment that we have a street. And in this fictional street, there are 4 houses. And these 4 houses, one of them is called Russia, One of them is called China, one of them is called Iran, and one of them is called the West. So these are houses and families, one single family lives in every single one of these houses. Now we know that in the house called Russia, in the house called China, and in the house called Iran, these families, they keep slaves and they abuse their children and they rape their daughters and, they spill blood and, those really horrific things, and they don't feed their people, use their imagination, go really, really horrific. And some of the households are more horrific than the rest, but nevertheless, the rights of these citizens are not being respected. So if you live on that street, so, the house called the West, what would you do? Would you just go about, pretend nothing ever happened and all is well and no atrocities are being committed? That's definitely a choice. I mean, indifference and ignoring reality, that's certainly an option. I mean, we can just put our head into sand and pretend nothing is wrong. But then the other option is to find a way to take care of this problem in the most civilized manner possible. Again, I'm not suggesting killing anybody at this point, but we might be able to have a meeting between those other, people that, are not committing those atrocities and find a way to take care of this problem.
Thank you. A man almost in the end. You, please stand up and speak. So the question is to Mr. Khodorkovsky about Open Russia and going forward to the 2016 elections.
Странно было бы утверждать, что демократическим путем можно взять власть у авторитарного режима.
It would be odd to presume that one can take power away from autocracy in a democratic way.
В то же время было бы ошибкой не использовать возможности, предоставляемые авторитарным режимом, для того, чтобы доводить свои идеи до людей.
It would be a mistake, however, not to use those means and opportunities that the authoritarian regime provides you with to spread your ideas, disseminate your thoughts, and convey your position to the people.
Все-таки мы живем в 21 веке.
Because after all, we all live in the 21st century.
И даже авторитарный режим вынужден сохранять некий антураж.
And even an authoritarian regime is bound to preserve some kind of a decent entourage.
А соответственно, у оппозиции появляется возможность оказать давление на режим и главное продемонстрировать людям, что у режима есть альтернатива.
Therefore, the opposition receives an opportunity to, on the one hand, put some pressure on the regime, and on the other hand, to show to the people that there are alternatives available.
Это и есть наша задача.
And this is precisely what our objective is.
Just a quick follow-up. Doesn't you risk the chance of legitimizing the election and the Putin regime?
Не возникает ли риск легитимизации таким образом процесса выборов при путинском режиме?
Вы правы. Любые действия гражданского общества, кроме радикального протеста, дают определенную легитимацию для режима.
You are correct, because any actions by the civic society other than the radical protests do provide a share of legitimacy to the ruling regime.
И когда мы выступаем в суде, мы тоже легитимируем это незаконное действия.
When we speak in courtrooms, by doing so, we too legitimize this unlawful establishment.
И здесь надо выбирать или демонстрировать полное неприятие режима, или пользоваться теми возможностями, которые он дает для публичного донесения своей позиции.
So here you have a choice. Either you get completely alienated from the regime, or you use those few opportunities that the regime offers you to voice your position.
Это тактическое решение.
This is a tactical decision to make.
Right. Go over there.
Thank you. Stan Kavala is my name. I'm not in line of all the questions and answers. Isn't it so that the practical pragmatism is the worst enemy of human rights? Example, we have then the Nobel Peace Prize to Liu Xiaobo, his name, and Norway is experience sanctions from China, and Norwegian tradesmen are terrified. No more peace prize to a political dissident. But Mr. Putin, you can sanction against Mr. Putin, and after that, the NRK correspondent says that there will be a train link, train between Moscow and Beijing. So,
Right.
we just talk about all these human rights things. It collides with the political realities, doesn't it?
Yes, I'm going to ask I will start with you, Jianli. Of course, Norway has a pretty bad relationship with China now after the Nobel Committee gave the Peace Prize to Liu Xiaobo. How do you see this trade-off between pragmatism and being very firm on human rights?
Yep, there is a myth in the international community that if one country takes a strong stance on human rights with China, China will retaliate using its economic power, cut off trade. And that happened to, it's a myth. Why I said it's a myth? Because it's, I have not seen any significant example to test this theory is true. And as far as Norway concerned, 4 years ago, Liu Xiaobo was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. China came out right away, threatened to cut off import of salmon and oil from Norway, economic sanction against Norway. But 4 days after the ceremony, that was December 14th, 2010, 4 days after the ceremony, award ceremony, the largest state-owned oil company struck a deal with a Norwegian oil company. And a few months later, I returned to Norway again, Oslo. And I was at a ceremony representing Liu Xiaobo. And I returned in May for the Freedom Forum. And I met on one occasion with an official of Chamber of Commerce here, and asked him how much impact on Norway's economy by China's cut down the import of salmon to China. This official told me it was Chinese officials who actually told us how to get around that. So I tell you why. 2 reasons. So we have to break this myth for people to understand how to deal with China. I support trade. Okay, trade is no problem. So Chinese Communist Party has only one source of legitimacy to rule in China. That is a faster economic growth. So economy, trade is the last thing they want to jeopardize. So whenever they say, I will retaliate, cut of trade, it's just a bluff. Another thing, You have to understand that if you go to China, you know, if you do business, you know, every piece of business involves a bribe. That means the individual officials actually benefit most from a trade with you. So they don't care about the image of the country, they care about their pocket. So no matter what, they continue trade with you. So there's a fear. That's the fear. The fear is self-imposed. So my suggestion is trade with China, at the same time taking strong stance on human rights issues.
We have two more questions on the speakers list before we end. First, it's you who approached me in white shirt, and afterwards Anders Romein. So speak up and ask question.
Yes, hello, my name is Ulay Khan. I'm the business editor of Netavis. I have a business question for you. I interviewed Bill Browder last night, and he said that the business community doing business in Russia had gone from bad to insane. He said, Telenor, Statoil, get the hell out of Russia. What is your view on that?
So the question is about doing business in Russia.
Я говорил в ответе на предыдущий вопрос, что не стоит жертвовать моральными ценностями ради прагматизма.
By way of answering the previous question, I said that one should not sacrifice its moral values to the cause of pragmatism.
Это, как показывает и мой опыт, не очень хороший выбор.
My personal experience proves that this is a wrong choice to make.
Поэтому, если бизнес может вести работу в России, не жертвуя моральными ценностями, отлично.
Therefore, the answer is this. If one can do business in Russia without sacrificing its moral values, so be it. If not, the decision is yours.
Right.
Just one follow-up question.
Very quick, we are running out of time.
I had the pleasure of interviewing your son 2 years ago. He was sat in that chair, exact chair. And there was one thing he said that I thought about a lot afterwards. He said that you knew when you went back to Russia in 2003 after visiting him in the US that you would get arrested. Why did you go back?
So the question is that when Pavel Khodorkovsky, his son, was sitting here in a earlier breakfast meeting, why did Mr. Khodorkovsky go back when you knew you would be arrested?
I was sitting next to him.
Yes, it's true.
Это был тяжелый выбор.
It was a tough choice to make.
Но на самом деле выбора не было.
But in actual fact, there was no choice.
Потому что если бы я не пошел в тюрьму,
Because had I not gone to prison,
то все, что я бы говорил, никто бы не услышал.
everything that I would be saying later on would not have been heard by anybody.
Last question, Anders Romein.
Thank you. Anders Romein, the Norwegian Institute for Defense Studies. The history of political oppression and persecution is one of empty chairs. And I'd like the panel to imagine expanding today's excellent panel with someone, a world leader or a dear friend. You can choose again if you want, Marina. And what you would address to them. If you had Putin here, if you had an inspirational dissident, for instance.
So the last question is, if you had to choose one person to address, who would you choose? And I think you can bring that along with your final comment. So we start with you, Marina Nemat, your closing statement. And if you have an answer to Mr. Romein, please go ahead.
Actually, I would love to have all world leaders in this room. I'm going to go big. I'm going to go jackpot with this one. So I would like to have a jackpot. Not that I've ever had anyone in any shape, but I would like the opportunity, really, to grab them by the shoulder and go really close and make them really uncomfortable. And I would really like to look at them in the eye and breathe in their face and say, please don't make decisions that would end a lot of would make a lot of blood appear on your hands. Look at your hands and make sure no matter what you do, there is no blood on them.
Any final comments? Closing statements?
Do something. The final comment is just look around you. A society is measured by the way it treats its weakest. Look at I know who is the weakest in my society. It's the political prisoners in Iran. They are the weakest. So look at who is the weakest in your society and stand up and do something about it.
Thank you. Mr. Jianli, your final comments?
I will begin with a story here. 4 years ago, when I representing Liu Xiaobo here, I was asked by media, so many people in your movement may also deserve Nobel Peace Prize. So who do you think will be next? And I answered, no, I said, no, we have Liu Xiaobo to represent us. That is enough. I hope the next Chinese who will win Nobel Peace Prize will be the leader of Communist Party. So if I have a chance, I will sit down with President Xi Jinping saying that continue the communist dictatorship is not achievement. You will not go down in history beautifully, but open a new era. And the Nobel Peace Prize is waiting for you here in Oslo.
Your final closing arguments, Mr. Khodorkovsky.
Мне часто говорят, точнее спрашивают, не хочу ли я мстить.
I'm often being asked if I wanted to take revenge.
И когда я откровенно отвечаю, что нет,
and every time I wholeheartedly say, no, I don't,
люди говорят, но как же, если те другие будут знать, что их простят, они же не будут иметь мотивации жить по-другому.
And people ask me, how come? Because if the other ones know that they will be forgiven, they will not be motivated to change.
И тем не менее, это сложный выбор.
And nevertheless, this is a difficult choice.
Тем не менее, я остаюсь на своей позиции. Я бы им сказал, покайтесь и вас простят.
But I stand firm grounds. I say to them, repent and you shall be forgiven.
So before we give the panel a warm round of applause, let me thank you, the audience. You've been very disciplined. Let me thank the panelists. And remember the Putin-style closing now. You sit down, they leave, and I tell you when to get up. Thank you so much.